Good, good. Hold. This again. Get Echo, I think we fixed it. Perfect. All right, it is 5:01 and I will call the meeting to order, and it looks like we have everyone except for Bob Pfeiffer and Harry Kelly. Is that correct? That's correct. All right, we do have a quorum. All right, the agenda. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes from the February meeting. I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So move.
Move in a second.
Yes.
All right, we have a motion in a second.
No.
I'd like to make one change to the minutes.
Okay.
On page 2, in our discussion of Mr. Wood's initial motion regarding runway 321, change the word useless in my comments to ineffectual, please.
All right, can we? Ben, you have that amendment to the minutes?
Yes, noted.
All right, perfect. And do you accept that amendment in your motion?
Yes.
All right, perfect. All right, all in favor, including that amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion's passed. All right, next move to public comment. So we'll start with in-person public comment first. I'll say your name, hopefully I can read it on the list, and then you have 3 minutes for public comment. If you get close to that time period, I'll probably just look at you, have my watch, and go from there. And then we'll move to online. First up, we have Deborah Bose.
Yep.
All right.
So I'm probably a familiar face. Been here for a few board meetings. Deborah Bose, I live in downtown Superior. I represent 16,000 residents, which swells to about 20 on the weekends because we have a lot of sporting venues. I was privileged to be here last month and listen to many pilots talk about how difficult it is to land and take off from this airport because of the erratic winds and this being a windy corridor. It is. We live in there, in that corridor. We lost our homes in the Marshall Fire. So we're familiar with catastrophe. We're familiar with loss of our property and our belongings, but we're not familiar with losing lives. And I never come here and talk about noise. This is not about the noise. As a matter of fact, we appreciate the noise because the noise is an alarm that tells us before our feet hit the ground every morning, oh my God, not if, but when. Is this the day we're going to have an accident over our high density neighborhood? There's no place to land. These low flying prop planes, I'm going to hear about helicopters, I'm not hear about F-16s, any of those. It's the low flying prop planes that fly every 2 to 5 minutes over our homes. The noise is an alarm. You know, after the Marshall Fire, we get red flag warnings, right? I think you do also here in this county. We know what to do. We've been through it. We don't know what to do with an alarm going off every 2 to 5 minutes. What do you do? Do you shove your stuff in the back of your car and then take it out? Then 5 minutes later, you do the same thing? We don't know how to evacuate. We're sitting ducks when these flights, low flying prop planes with some training pilots, I heard them here talk last month about safety concerns, including one of your board members, how difficult it is here. You have an emergency runway, it's going to be closed at the beginning of next year. We're very concerned. I took all that information back to my neighborhood. We're grateful for the noise, but we don't know what to do with that alarm when it goes off every 2 to 5 minutes over our neighborhood. Not if, when. When? Is today the when? Is tomorrow when we wake up? Is that the when? Is that the day? It will happen. So I'm just here to represent and express our concerns for safety. We don't want to lose a family, children, kids at a sporting event in our neighborhood because of low-flying propeller planes. Thank you.
Hey, Deborah.
Yeah,
All right, next up, we have Hugh.
Hi, my name's Hugh Britton, and I live in countryside neighborhood over here in Westminster. I tried hard, I can see my house from here. I originally came with a story about noise and the fact that the pilots apparently don't care. But preparing to come over here, I listened to last month's board meeting recording with Jeffco and all those pilots. And listening to her just now, I would like to reiterate that these prop planes fly very low, virtually all the time, over thousands of people every day. Very dense housing, you can see it out there, all out there. One plane hitting a goose from Stanley Lake, my side of the airport, going down in that neighborhood would be absolutely catastrophic. Listening to the pilots last week, or last month at the last meeting, suggests that there's some real concern with that. And I hope the board considers the safety of the neighbors. The actions of the pilots and what I've heard at least one pilot say suggests that the nice words, the nice emails, the fact that we can actually report noise online, report safety things to the FAA and so forth. They all the actions of the pilots and talking to only one pilot, but maybe he speaks for everybody, maybe he doesn't, suggests that they don't care about the noise. Probably care about the safety because they'll be in the plane that falls out of the sky and sets a neighborhood. So I hope the board, this board, does what you can to control this. And I will also say that I walk my dog across on the ridge on the dog park over here, Westminster Hills Dog Park. I watch the planes, they fly out, they come around, and what do? They lose altitude. They drop altitude right over my neighborhood. They're 500, 200, 500, 400 feet above, not 1,000 feet that is recommended for flying over high density housing. So words and actions aren't matching, and I really implore the board to consider the impact basically on the mental health, if you will, the safety situation, and also, I will say it because I'm probably wasting my breath, but the noise too. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. All right, next we have Joe. Joe, sorry, I can't read your last name.
Panam.
Panam, that's what I thought. Thank you.
My name is Joe Panam. I live in the, actually down south in the Chatfield area, reservoir down there. It's now mainly, it's densely populated now with new communities there, Solstice community as well as Sterling Ranch community. And I'm here to basically complain about not only the noise but also the safety because of the low flying aircraft, aircraft mainly from flight schools. They're just going around in circles and they're flying with, like I said, low altitude. It's every 2 to 5 minutes from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Or some days that are, that we can tolerate, but most days it's constant. And the other thing is we're dealing with aircrafts from Centennial Airport. Now we have aircraft here from the Washington Metro as well. Excuse me. In fact, my wife we get online just about every day and look at the air track or flight track of all these aircrafts. I would say 80% of the aircraft down in our area are coming from this airport. The rest are Centennial. We're closer to Centennial. So, and from what I heard from the Arapahoe County, which I attended last week, they decreased flights there because it's now densely populated, whereas previously it wasn't. So that's why they were flying down there. But I also heard from Randy Johnson. I believe he spoke last month too, and he lives just south of us. So he's got the same issues and concerns. And as far as other noise, my wife is really sensitive to that aircraft and it's causing her trauma. She's going to therapy because of that, because it's she's having suicidal thoughts because of the noise and just the safety issues. So that's all I'm going to say. And thank you for being able to speak.
Thank you, Joe. All right, next we have Russell.
Russell Heiner from Skystone. Yeah, I just reiterate what everyone else has already said. Live up and just over here, walk this area a lot. Yeah, the noise, I mean, the flight patterns keep changing, but the noise seems to be continually persistent and certainly the safety concerns. I certainly understand watching how low some of these planes are when they take off, especially when they're coming over 120 up there. It's rather amazing that sometimes they actually manage to clear the road. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you, Russell. And last we have Oliver. Oliver.
I think someone was having trouble figuring out how to sign up online for public comment as well, so. Yeah. So I'm Oliver. I'm from Superior. I've attended nearly every AAB and CNR meeting for the past 4 years or so. And while I don't often give public comment, I'm here today with 3 topics I hope we can work through together. First is on the 2025 full year noise reports. Want to start by acknowledging the board's efforts to run efficient meetings. As a parent of a young child, I certainly appreciate that. That said, I was hoping we'd have more time to dig into the noise report data at last month's meeting, especially given the new board members' perspectives I was looking forward to hearing. I did reach out afterwards to ask whether it could be added onto this month's agenda, but I was a little disappointed to see that it wasn't included. Topics with this level of community interest benefit from full board discussion, and I think residents feel heard when they see that data is being examined openly. I'd encourage the board to consider how to create that space going forward. On the data itself, for the second consecutive year, the airport has received over 10,000 noise reports. And 2026 is already tracking higher with over 1,000 reports in January alone, and an airport's projection of over 13,000 for the full year. In other industries, a trend like this would typically prompt an audit and a structured conversation about solutions. Given that the reports have climbed year over year for at least 7 years, I think it's fair to ask what new measurable actions can the board and airport leadership commit to in order to bend this curve. I'd love to see some ownership on these numbers paired with a concrete plan to bring them down. Second, on the upcoming closure of runway 321, last month we heard from pilots, residents, and board members alike about the desire to keep this runway open. And the consistent response was that there was no funding available. I understand budget constraints are real, but I'm not aware of any formal grant application having been submitted to either CAB or the FAA for these funds. Stating that these funds don't exist before formally requesting them makes it difficult for the community, both pilots and residents both, to feel confident that every avenue has been explored. My ask is pretty straightforward. Would the board recommend that the airport formally apply for the relevant grants? Even if it's unsuccessful, it would demonstrate a documented good faith effort and give the community confidence that nothing was left on the table. Finally, I'm grateful to the airport for offering unleaded fuel. One thing I'd love clarity on is the eligibility figures. Recent communications have stated that approximately 2/3 of aircraft can use the unleaded fuel option. But the AAB meeting packet from just a few months ago indicated that only 20 to 25% are eligible for the SWIFT UL 94. I'd appreciate any context that the board can give and offer on how that figure changed so significantly in a short period of time. For your time and the work you do, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Oliver. All right, that is everyone we have public and then.
I've got 3 online, and just a note, if anyone's still trying to register, there's still time. As the instructions on the screen say, you need to find the chat button on WebEx and chat me with your name and community, and we'll register as you for public comment. Randy Johnson, you are first up. I'm unmuting you now.
Do you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Randy.
Good. Okay, all the buttons. Thank you. This is Randy Johnson. I live in Laverre, south of Chatfield. just west of Santa Fe. I live um, south and west of Joe, who just spoke. And my issue with the Rocky Mountain airplanes is when flying directly over, they're very noticeable. I want to say most airplanes, many of them are still spreading out and going and slower, but I'm getting a few more that are going faster and lower directly over. I write down the airplanes I hear. Doesn't necessarily mean they fly directly over. This last month, I wrote down 209 from Centennial, 181 from Rocky Mountain. The previous month, I actually had more from Rocky Mountain than Centennial. I submitted 59 complaints to Centennial and 15 to Rocky Mountain, which is higher than had been in the past, except last month I submitted 14 to Rocky Mountain. Um, I just, what I've been having a problem with is the Centennial airplanes, coming by me. There's more open space by me, and I realized that the planes were purposely turning to fly directly over because I've been very active with the noise issue here, but so it's being addressed, and I know I'm going to hear airplanes. I just like to request a stay, versus flying over the houses. Actually, one from Rocky Mountain this morning flew directly over Solstice, flew over the main Sterling Ranch, flew over Laveers, flew over Sedalia, and flew over directly over Castle Rock. I don't think it was a training airplane, but it was very interesting that it basically flew over all the subdivisions and houses versus staying over the open space. That's all I have. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Randy.
All right, the next one I have is Kevin. I don't have your last name. If you can give that for the record, I'd appreciate it. But you're unmuted, and you might have to unmute yourself as well.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you, Kevin, and you have
Great.
3 minutes.
Great. Thank you. Good evening. This is, sorry, looking at some notes. This is Kevin Ryan, speaking tonight as a Superior resident and not in any other capacity. I want to comment on an agenda item today about runway 321, and specifically the statement that says no viable solution that would compete for funding was available for runway 321. That conclusion assumes that a meaningful enhancement project has actually been explored and evaluated. FAA and CAB decisions are not about whether a runway exists. They're about specific projects. Safety improvements, operational efficiencies, and infrastructure modernization will all be evaluated through that process. So before declaring that no project could compete, it'd be very helpful for this board today and the community to understand specific alternatives that were studied and why they were deemed non-competitive, and specifically by whom. The reason this matters is closing a runway is not just a maintenance decision, it's a structural change to the airport. 321, as a reminder, as I talked about last month, was promised as the preferential runway in the master plan when your neighbors in Rock Creek built their homes. Today, it provides operational flexibility and redundancy. Aviation redundancy is an obvious safety issue. Removing a runway will concentrate activity on the remaining runways and reduces those operational options. There is also an important contractual dimension in this discussion that deserves much more attention. Many of these aviation easements, including my own, were accepted based on assumptions that runway configurations and how aircraft operations would be distributed across different communities. Those assumptions are reflected in past planning documents, including the master plan work that guided the development around the airport. If runway 321 is eliminated, aircraft activity will necessarily be concentrated on the remaining runways. That changes the distribution of impacts across surrounding neighborhoods. In other words, those contractual easements that were accepted based on a 3-runway airport, if the airport becomes a 2-runway airport, the assumptions behind them change. And I frankly don't see how compliance to those easements can be claimed. There's also a broader policy context here. Colorado adopted House Bill 1235 to strengthen the relationship between airports and surrounding communities. One of the key principles behind that law is that airports receiving state funding must demonstrate meaningful engagements with affected communities and show that their planning decisions are consistent with that framework. It goes further. Certification of compliance to existing easements is required. Unless the airport plans on rescinding existing grant applications or not applying in the future for money, this is a critical decision that this board today needs to discuss. Decisions about closing a runway, decisions that materially change operations, resulting in community impacts, including non-compliance with existing easements, should be evaluated through that lens. At a minimum,
You have a few seconds to finish up.
all right, four things. First, an assessment of how operation and change major configuration exists these easements is required. Second, further discussion around the safety implications required. Third, operational noise distribution impact should be studied. Fourth, additional analysis on what alternatives were considered. Before taking that step, the board and the broader community should deserve a fuller analysis, more transparent conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
All right, and then we have one more, Kyle Heckman. I'm unmuting you now.
All right, Kyle.
I'm here, local general aviation pilot. I've been operating out of the airport for about 25 years. My comments will be short and informal, but I wanted to congratulate the airport on the 94 UL unleaded fuel implementation. I know that was a big project, took a lot of effort over time, and so congratulations on that. Also wanted to show my appreciation for the data being provided on operations, fuel, noise complaints in these packets. I think that's very good and very complete. It does show, interestingly enough, the operations returning to pre-pandemic levels of 6 or 7 years ago, almost those of 2018, 2019, should have a positive impact on the airport's noise profile and its operations, just in terms of hopefully offsetting some of the challenges with noise. So I just want to point that out to the extent that it persists at this level. And then I'll just also, second or third, the comments about runway 321. I think we've got a good piece of pavement there. We've had a dry winter. I know that frost cracking and the freeze thaw cycle is the enemy of pavement. And so hopefully that and subsequent winters will extend its life, and appreciate everything that's being done to further its life. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Anyone else?
That's it.
All right, I will close public comment at this time, and we can move on to the business side.
Me. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so last time we met, there was a motion that was provided. What is the minimum viable solution that can secure funding and support of the BCC that can keep the runway open? I believe that was more or less verbatim what the motion was on the table. As was pointed in public comment, there's a couple things that go into the runway when it was evaluated, and a couple things that go into what I tried to look at as part of that request for that motion. Essentially, what has happened is there is no change on that viability. When we're talking about that, we'll go through this presentation, we'll talk about kind of what that runway might look like if it were to be different. But in no case has I been told by the FAA or by the state that this runway would ever compete for funding. I know there's conversation about it maybe not having a grant application, or it may not have those things. The grant application for a project for a runway will not show up on a CIP that has not been already approved by the state. So the feds do not see a CIP that they do not want something on it. So we have already been told from the feds and from the state, do not even bother doing that, because to do it, we're just going to remove it anyway. It will never see a grant application. It's just not how that system is set up. So when we're talking about that kind of process, we could put together a CIP that had it on it. I would show it to you. And when it came time to submit for that grant, it would never show up anywhere. It would be removed from WIMS. It'd be removed almost like it never existed. That's my understanding of the situation. That's what I've been explained to by CDOT, by the FAA, for the ADO. There isn't a funding solution that will exist to save that runway for the future. Next slide. The runway is currently 3,600 feet long. That's just how long it is. And in the cost estimate that we have to replace that runway is about $10.2 million. It's about $38 per square foot to reconstruct that runway in its full length. Decreasing its length doesn't increase its capacity to have funding. Just because it costs less doesn't mean there will be money in the state to pay for it. The state has its priorities on new runways, surface relocation, on other airports with single runways. They're not looking to fund this crosswind runway here, no matter how long it is. There was some conversation about its length. Back in 2023, I believe it was, we did a runway analysis of that runway, and there was a number of different scenarios that were outlaid as to whether it's full length, whether it was shorter, or whether it was removed. In previous packets, I included that full study. That full study is also on the airport's website. Anybody anytime can look at what was evaluated as part of that runway's decision. 1,900 feet is the length from the north end of the runway to just short of taxiway Alpha. Because of how that runway would be configured, the FAA would not look at extending it through the runways. It would end up being kind of like Centennial, where the runways stop before the parallels. Because to do that and to stay clear of the taxiway, you get 1,900 feet. That is what would be left. Next, 1,900 feet at the same cost is about $5.4 million. But that number doesn't help it compete with more funding. It's not like because it's now half the cost, I could then go to the federal government and say, hey, it's now cheaper, would you still fund it? It will not compete for funding just because it's smaller. I don't have a scenario where I find a funding mechanism that can materially reconstruct that runway. It can continue to potentially eke by until it needs to be closed due to surface conditions, but at the end of the day, there isn't a way to construct 1,900 feet runway or 3,600 feet runway that would be federally eligible for funding. I know we've had other comments about pilots talking about the condition of the pavement. And certainly our prerogative as the airport is to not operate pavement that's in an unsatisfactory condition. We want to make sure that all the pavement at the airport is well in good condition. It's not a good thing for the airport to operate a pavement on a runway that is substandard. We want to make sure that those pavement condition indexes, all the PCIs, are as high as we possibly can get for that surface. We are currently monitoring the condition of that runway. Our operations teams are doing quarterly inspections of more in-depth than their daily inspections. But at the end of the day, there isn't a short-term solution that allows us to reconstruct that runway that won't end in eventual closure. That closure could be during part of the master plan process. Doesn't necessarily have to be January, but the FAA has set aside January 1st of next year as the date they expect that runway to be closed. Excellent. Conversation about hotspots. The FAA has kind of talked about hotspots a lot as one of the justifications for the runway. We've seen, due to the new traffic pattern use of the airport, due to the way they navigate aircraft on the airport, we've seen a decrease in the number of incursions that happen down there between Delta, Bravo, and the crosswind runway. So that's a good thing, but the hotspots won't fund it. Just because the hotspots go away doesn't change its funding outlook. So hotspots may be one motion of why the FAA wants to accelerate its closure, but at the end of the day, there isn't a funding mechanism that's in place that would keep that runway in good working order over the long term. Next slide. And I know there were a couple of public comments about the runway. I certainly can try to answer those if the board has any questions. So I'll kind of pause here for any questions.
No questions. I'll just make a comment, I guess. I had voted for the motion as well, and I appreciate the time that you guys have put into it. I think it's clear that you took it seriously and looked at what you can. I don't like the outcome. I'm guessing you may not either. But it's clear that, you know, based on history, that trains left the station, and I get it. Again, I don't like it for a variety of reasons. Safety is certainly number one. Noise, I think. I mean, it's been many years since I was sent by ATC over to take off on 2-1, but it used to happen all the time. And I think from a noise standpoint, that would be a real positive to send a lot of propeller planes to take off to the south on that runway. And it's unfortunate, I think, that they don't do that anymore, but they haven't for years.
To talk about that for a second, because it was brought up too, when we're doing the Part 150 study as part of this process, part of the analysis of that Part 150 is also looking at how that noise changes with that runway, on or off. So we're looking at what does that forecast, or what does that flow of aircraft look like with the runway in place, and then also without it. So we're trying to make sure that we cover all those bases so we can really look at what the change in noise levels might look for that. And the FAA is also going to use that information about what sort of environmental process is required in order to close it, whether it requires an EA or an EIS or whatever it might be. That change in noise impact is what will drive how the FAA looks at the environmental process of the actual closure. I don't want to close it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's not something that any airport person ever says, yeah, let's go close a runway. It's not a decision that's ever taken lightly, because it's been mentioned before. You close it, it won't come back.
Right.
A temporary closure would close it. And so it's not a decision any of us take lightly.
No, I appreciate that. And that's all I'm saying too, is I do think at one time, I think it was heavily used for, especially for departures. And it's unfortunate that it's not anymore, because I think it would make a big impact on noise issues. But on the other hand, with overall traffic being up, I can see where they've got to be concerned about cross traffic and so forth. I get it. I just don't like it. And then finally, I do think, and I'm not for a second suggesting that it's a factor now, I do think at one time, one of the factors was development. And I'm not for a second suggesting that it is anymore. I've never heard it even mentioned, but I do personally believe that at one point that was probably one of the causal factors for even bringing up the discussion. And that was so that it would free up a lot of this property on the north end of the runway. It's not anymore, and nobody's suggesting that it is, but I think that it's unfortunate, in my view anyway, that sort of started the discussion at some point a number of years back. But that said, I think you guys have done what you can. I really appreciate it. I think you've given a good faith effort to look at this issue for the benefit of the community and for pilots. And it is what it is. It's already been approved a number of years ago to close it, not only by the county commissioners, but by the FAA. And I think, again, that train's left the station, and probably time to reluctantly put this to bed. I appreciate the work that's gone into it.
I understand it's an emotional time. Like, it's frustrating on my end to a certain extent.
I'd just like to add too, I want to thank you for all the work you've done. It is very much appreciated. When this was brought up again, this past month, I did survey Civil Air Patrol pilots, and I got 0 pilots who said that they use 321, mainly because safety. And their CAP has always been very, very concerned about safety. And if the turbulence or the wind or other factors are present, we just don't fly. So I would just like to add about Civil Air Patrol.
Hey, this is Jim. Is it okay if I make a comment here?
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, first of all, I want to echo what the last 2 board members mentioned, and specifically to Eric. I'll tell you, Eric, when you first came on board as airport director, I think the loudest drum I was beating was how much we've lost trustworthiness among the community, among the pilots and tenants, with airport management and so forth. And I gotta say, you've really turned that around, in my opinion. I really appreciate the communication. Like, I'm dumbfounded that a week after we asked for this, you were already sending out emails to a few of us saying, hey, here's our thoughts and here's some ideas and all that. It's like we're at a different airport. So thank you for that series. I genuinely mean that. I think that with regard to this issue, I guess maybe I'm just refusing to believe there's not a Santa Claus or something, but I'm just dumbfounded that we can have a half a dozen pretty major projects like the unleaded fuel farm and the unleaded fuel truck and the snow plows and the taxiway Kilo and Delta and all these other improvement programs. But when it comes to a runway at an airport, that the funding bodies say, no, we're not gonna fund that. we'll get you a cool snowplow, but we won't fund a rehabilitation of a runway. And I understand it's from poor airport management for a couple decades, likely is really where our problem is lined up. I'd love to see that a formal written, I don't understand how the FAA can just call and say, yeah, close the runway, as opposed to we put forth a request for funding, and then they put written request and see if we can get it on the capital improvement program or the AIP or whatever it is. And then they formally deny it. At least it shows, as even one of the community members mentioned, at least it shows we took a swing at the ball. I also worry about when we were looking at the analysis on $5 million for the 1,900-foot runway, if that was aligned with like that Bravo 2 aircraft, or is it just for Alpha 1 aircraft, which are likely only, Alpha 1s are the only ones that are going to use a 1,900-foot emergency runway, if you will. So I'd love to know about that. And then the last question I had, well, I had two more and then I'll shut up. I'm hoping that when we say close the runway, it's paint a yellow X on the pavement. So if there is a true, and it's not just winds that can be the emergency. We all know, those pilots know that. We've got this conga line with the new FAA's traffic pattern, we have the conga line of people flying over 287 to enter midfield downwinds for both runways. You have a problem on that. My point that I'm aiming for when I'm on on Highway 287 is runway 21. So it's a straight in for if there needed to be an emergency landing. So it's not just crosswinds. But anyhow, I think those are the main. I'm hoping it's just a can of yellow paint with an X on it rather than plowing it up. So if I do have to call Mayday, we all know that, if you use the term Mayday, I can land in the parking lot if I want, right? To safely land the aircraft. That's the federal regulation. So at least if we had that emergency, I don't care if it's got cracks in it, I'm going to land in it, right? So anyhow, those are my thoughts.
I'll try to answer your three questions.
My 20 minutes of questions, Eric?
No, I don't take that copious of notes. Okay, so the first one would be the formal thought of, is there a way for the FAA or for CDOT to formally say this runway won't get funding? What we will get will be a letter that says the runway does not compete well for funding. The runway is not our primary concern as we fund other projects. There will not be a formal letter from the FAA or any government body that says no funding. It will be the read between the lines, we are funding other things. And so to get them to on paper say absolutely not, that's probably not something that's ever going to be possible. It's not possible to pin the federal government down that way. I've tried many times and they have lots of ninja moves that make that not possible. So the amount, how it got calculated was I took the estimate that we got from our construction engineer, Wolpert, for the 3,600 feet, took that times the 75-foot wide to get the total square footage of the runway. And I compared that to the square footage of a 1,900-foot runway and prorated the difference of that cost. So it has the same square foot cost. It's just a simple proration on a linear equation. It doesn't actually look at what the total cost of a 1,900-foot runway would be. But you can imagine it would be about the 50% mark, just based on the fact that you're doing 50% of the work. We have to remember that Bravo is also a consideration in this process. So when you're talking about the type of aircraft that are operating on that runway, I didn't try to decrease that value, because if I take that runway and I convert it into something like a visual utility runway, it will not that it will see funding now, but it will definitely never see any funding for maintenance if it becomes a visual utility runway. So it's not beneficial to call it a visual utility runway. But I did cost estimate it in the presentations here as it was just the same runway, just shorter. And as for painting the runway X, like we have cost estimates to paint it. There would be no immediate driving force to redevelop that area. I know one of our board members mentioned, development for the runway. There isn't like any immediate need to do that or any immediate focus to do that. If that was something that was contemplated, it would be in our next master plan, which is scheduled to start next year. So that conversation would be happening in the future. It's not something that we're looking to do anywhere time soon. But the cost estimate we do have from our consultant engineer is a simple paint it as closed that way rather than a structural obliteration. Airports don't do structural obliterations very often. And so it would be around for a while. I'm not going to tell you can land on it. That's not something that's within my power, but I understand what your comments are.
Okay, I appreciate it, Eric. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Eric, again, I'd like to echo, thanks for taking another pass at this, looking at it. I think this is something the board had a lot of discussion on, and thank you for your time for taking another look at it. Perfect.
Thank you. All right, maybe a fun topic. I don't know. Okay, so here's the deal. We have a number of airport surfaces, a number of roads around the airport, and as the airport looks at some of the mapping we're making and some of the GIS maps and leasehold maps that we have, it kind of helps me, this is maybe just an Eric need, to have names for some of the chutes and taxi lanes we have on some of the aprons. Some of them have colloquial names, some of them have no names at all. But for me, I would like to have some way to reference it, like in projects and paperwork, to say, that's that chute. So next slide. We have a number of roads, surfaces, don't have names, some have names. Some have official names, some are roads. So what I want some help with is finding out how to name some of these things that don't have names. So we'll go through there. Next slide. Here's the southwest development area of the airport. It has Pilatus and some of the areas that Ben will talk about later. But it has all the roads: Sims, Verve Parkway, Calendar Drive, Tower Road, Delta, Lima, Kilo, Pilatus Drive, and the future location of Jefferson County Parkway, assuming it gets built. Not a lot here to name, but we're going to use this as a preference so I can show you some of the named roads that we have around the airport. Next slide. On the north side of the airport, we have a number of other named roads: Rocky Road, Metro Avenue Road, Airport Way, Hangar Way, and you can read. So do you understand kind of what roads we have around the airport? But you can see all the T hangars, all the corporate hangars, all that stuff isn't taxiway. It's not taxi lane specifically. It's just driveway or roads, if you think about it as like a city. So next slide. So here's an example of, I guess, my request. This is a row of T hangars. They are not actually called D, E, F, G, H, I, J, A, K, and L. That's just me. I made that up. They have the numbers, but you can see Boeing, Cessna, North, South Corporate, Curtiss, de Havilland, Hughes. I made all those up, but that's the goal here. We want to try to figure out what we call those things. It seems maybe dumb, but it will help us make maps like this. And when we're making pavement projects, we can say that pavement project is happening on such and such taxi lane. So we want to set an internal name for those chutes. This is not something the FAA is going to recognize. It won't show up on charts, but it could show up on airport documents. It could show up on projects, show up on leases. It could show up in places where we need to reference that taxi lane. It only covers public infrastructure surfaces, not private leasehold. So if you have a private leasehold in the airport, we're not trying to rename your place. Next slide. So here's kind of how I see this going, and hopefully it goes well. I'm looking for suggestions from our tenants, from our airport board, community stakeholders, whoever might be interested in naming some of these things, about what names we might be able to use. I know we have a lot of history here at the airport, a lot of people that have part of our foundation of the airport over the years, and it might be appropriate to recognize that commitment they've had to the airport over their lifetimes. We would like to start from the west, go to the east, start from A to Z, and I wouldn't duplicate any names. So if I got a suggestion, I would look at those suggestions, try to figure out what made the most sense, and then go from there. Excellent. That's kind of it. I understand it seems kind of dumb, but the goal is to really try to figure out how we can get a general reference name for our general users and for maps that reflect where things are located on the airport. So if you do have ideas, about like how we might be able to name some of the chutes at the airport. I certainly would be interested in learning.
I think you should name them all after female aviators of the past.
I second that.
Never mind. Cancel on it.
Well,
No.
I'll tell you, I was driving in on Sidney Boyd Boulevard the other day and, you know, the one that leads into the airport. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be cool? I agree with what was just mentioned about famous aviators. I don't, you know, regardless of their gender. And I also think that there's some, like with Calendar Way. I mean, how do you not recognize Mr. Calendar, Dr. Calendar? You know, I think it's a great idea, just as an honorarium, you know, like Will Height Way or something like that. I think it'd be great. Yeah.
I think some of them are, we were used to some names on certain ones, like the main jet taxiway.
Mhm.
And so that one, people know that. And so I probably stick with that one and then figure out the other ones.
I understand. If there's suggestions you might have on how to do it, that makes sense. Right now, the north-south corporate is generally what people call it, or east-west corporate is generally what people call it. And I'm not, as you can see in my example, I did not propose a different name for it. Just because everybody kind of knows that big double wide taxiway is north-south corporate. So, but yeah, I certainly would be interested in learning more about what people have as opinion, whether that's famous aviators, all female aviators, Earnhardt Way might be interesting. Who knows? But yeah, that's that topic. And I think Ben is next.
Okay, you good?
Any other questions?
On the project updates, this one's been on there for a while. It is still in winter shutdown, Kilo and Delta. We're looking to pick that back up mid to late April. Feels weird to not be out there working given the weather it is now, but the asphalt plant couldn't predict that, so the asphalt's not available. So the one thing we're still working on is kind of the costs and additional calendar days to move to a full reconstruction of that taxiway connector that I've talked about before. That will result in a runway closure of some significant length, maybe 35, 40 days. So we're working to understand where that fits in the schedule. And more on that to come. Then we can move on to taxiway Delta reconstruction phase 2. This is actively in design with Wolpert right now. It's kind of an aggressive schedule as well. We are hoping to be out to bid for this project in April and May with construction this summer. This will also have a potentially about a month-long closure due to the reconstruction of Delta 5. So potentially between the two, just I think pilots should be aware there's going to be some significant runway closure timeframes during this year. Heads up on that one. Southwest Development RFP, and we wanted to bring this back up. Eric presented on it in 2025, and I didn't want to fall off your minds. It's still been within Jefferson County, kind of discussing the process, but we're hoping to be out for a solicitation sometime in the next month or so. We're working with Jeffco purchasing on that right now. The current plan, and this is tentative, is that we're open for solicitation through the summer, perhaps potentially even longer, and then close that solicitation, review the proposals, have a scoring committee, and ultimately have ground lease negotiations and potentially awards sometime by the end of this year. We're also working on a corresponding marketing effort, which is a little tricky because we're going through the solicitation through Jeffco purchasing. That's kind of very standardized and driven by like the bidding process. But we know that this is also a development marketing opportunity. And so we're working through how that works with both internally and with the Jeffco EDC. So more to come on that, but that's not something that's completely fallen off. There is a draft RFP that's an internal review. We do have conceptual lots laid out, but ultimately we're going to look for proposals and score them on highest and best use and reserve the right to award it to none or all or some combination of good development that we'd all like to see over there. Update on the Part 150 airport noise compatibility study. We are awfully close to having actual noise exposure maps, which will include the first phase of the study. We are wrapping up the draft input data right now. That will be the subject of the next focus group meetings, which are scheduled to occur April 1st and 2nd. I think there's a member of this body on one of those focus groups. we also are proposing to come back with an actual noise exposure map draft report around the May 1st-ish timeline. So that's kind of in your minds. Think May is when we might kind of doing the public engagement for the first, including the first phase of that study. We do have one proposal in here, and I don't know if you want to talk about now or at the end of this meeting, but our consultant can come present that final or that draft final report to this body May 20th, but not May 15th, your regularly scheduled meeting. Eric and I can do some sort of version of it if you want to stick with May 13th and don't want to move to May 20th, but if you're able to move to May 20th, we can bring the real experts to present on that. So something to talk about. I'll conclude with the last. We're aiming for the second public open house in late May, tentatively May 19th, but we're still working to nail down a venue. And then ultimately the final report after it's been reviewed and been received input back to the Jeffco Board of County Commissioners in June or July. It's the current plan to kind of move towards the conclusion of phase 1 of that study. That's all I got. So I don't know if you want to talk about our request for that meeting date now or at the end of the meeting.
At the end of the meeting, we can schedule April and May at the same time.
All right, then I hand it off to Sydney.
Okay. Unleaded fuel is now available at RMMA. So Shelter was selected to provide unleaded aviation fuel to airport users with sales beginning in February. Next slide. So managed by Shelter and funded jointly by RMMA and a CDOT grant, our unleaded aviation fuel program supports parity with leaded fuel. In other words, despite the current higher wholesale pricing for unleaded aviation fuel, Swift 94 UL is offered at the same cost as leaded fuel. The Supplemental Type Certificate or STC reimbursement program reimburses the cost of the STC required for based aircraft to receive FAA approval for the use of UL94 unleaded avgas. And that link takes you to our unleaded fuel transition webpage that has the STC form and all the information there.
Question.
Yeah.
For you and Eric. Or for Eric, I imagine.
Perfect.
What's up?
Can we estimate what percentage of aircraft based at RMMA have the capability to obtain a supplemental type certificate for a fleet authorization and use 94 unleaded?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, like, there was a public comment about kind of related to this topic for the unleaded transition plan.
What prompted me to ask?
Yeah, so roughly the way that Swift Fuels looks at it is about 2/3 of the piston fleet can use UL94. That's what they say in their market materials. That's what Chris Acosta from Swift Fuels would say. It's about 2/3 of the piston fleet can use Swift Fuel 94. The unleaded fuel transition plan talks about the fact that we would anticipate about 20% of our fleet here being able to transition. So that's the difference, is like, we're looking at the flight schools and can they transition? Will other piston engine aircraft transition? And we're thinking like 20% is probably where we probably targeting that for our aviation fleet, but about 2/3 of all piston aircraft can use it.
So that's a big difference between 20% and 2/3.
We can't force them to use it. We're going to try with Sydney's help and with our users to spread the good word about unleaded fuel. We are paying the STC cost. So if somebody wants to transition to unleaded fuel, we will pay that transition cost and reimburse them for it. We are certainly paying, we're using CDOT subsidy amount to make sure that the unleaded and leaded fuel is the same cost to the user. And so the FBO, we're working with that to make sure that that works good for them. We're trying to remove as many bottlenecks from the adoption of unleaded as we can, but it's a new product. There's some uncertainty with it. And we're working with, communicating with our tenants to try to make that happen. It's just a matter of time. They have only so many years left before they have to transition anyway. And so we're trying to make sure that all of our communications with our tenants talk about the benefits of switching to unleaded fuel, talking about how some people have seen it being a benefit for the maintenance of their aircraft, and some of its cost is less. We have one flight school who has said they've fully converted to unleaded fuel. And so McAir is slowly transitioning. WAFA is fully transitioned, such as their fleet is in Centennial. And so we're working with all of our other users, and part of that is being here to talk about it. So if there's anybody that has any questions about what we pay for or how the subsidy program works or how they get reimbursed for STCs, it's also on our website. City had talked about the website location where you can go to fill out the form. And so we're trying to make it as easy as we possibly can, but it's not practical to think that overnight or within a short amount of time, 2/3 of our fleet will switch.
And Eric, I agree 100%. About 20% of the airplanes on the field can do it. We're at a higher altitude, so we have a lot of customers that have higher performance airplanes. 210s and NANs and stuff, those cannot take that fuel. So we end up with a kind of a little bit limited. If we're sea level, I think we'd have more airplanes that would be available to take that fuel. But at this altitude, we have more higher performance airplanes because of it. And they go over the mountains and stuff like that. So, and they cannot take that fuel. So I think the 20% mark is right on target.
But hey, Greg, this is Jim. So if Swift comes through with 100 unleaded, then that'll encompass a far more significant part of our fleet, right?
Yes, from what I understand is the 100 UL will cover all the piston airplanes. The only thing that they're concerned about is the old Warbird airplanes, and that's not very many planes here on the field. So yeah, then the majority of the airplanes could all take that.
I do know from our conversations with Swift that once they have the 100R or the 100 octane replacement ready to go, they will stop like producing the UL 94 and force the transition of people over to the unleaded 100 octane. So starting with UL 94 gets it in the market. And then as Swift Fuels is ready to go and certified for the 100 octane solution, we should see wider adoption. So it's going to kind of be on a treadmill or an accelerated climb for a little while, Jim.
If they have a STC for the 94, would they have to get another one for the 100 or no?
I would imagine,
yes. So,
but
yeah.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about noise reports, not in the detail that Eric did last month, but just reporting. So we are a partnering airport with the FAA in terms of aircraft noise reports. Depending on the source of the report, an individual may want to file with RMMA with us if it's within 5 miles of the airport, or the FAA if it's further than 5 miles from the airport. A noise report can be filled with us through our noise report form, which is linked there and on our website, or by calling that phone number. The FAA administers the aviation noise complaint and inquiry response. That's a separate form. Both of those are linked here. Next slide. Reports about aircraft safety or hazardous operations should be directed to the Denver Flight Standards District Office. And if the report is about low-flying aircraft, you may want to review this brochure that's linked here about low-flying aircraft that's provided by the FAA. In August of 2025, we started responding to noise reports via email. It's a way for us as airport employees to be transparent in our logging process. All emailed noise reports will receive an email at the end of each month notifying you that your concern was logged and sharing information about our FAQs and different airport initiatives. A reminder about that any comments sent to feedback@flyrmma.com regarding the Part 150 study need to have Part 150 study in the subject line for the official record. And given that noise report response, I wanted to let the board know that this month, March, there was an email distribution error on March 2nd. An email was inadvertently sent using the CC line instead of the BCC line. The recipient email addresses were visible to the entire distribution list, and this was a procedural error, not a breach. There was no other information other than the email addresses sent out. It was identified quickly and it was addressed within 2 hours, and some safeguards are now in place. Next. So this is kind of that timeline of that response. So the email was sent using CC instead of BCC on March 2nd at 4 p.m. The error was brought to our attention the next morning, March 3rd at 9:21 a.m. From 9:30 to 11 a.m., we had an internal staff discussion about it, reviewed our distribution process, identified the administrative cause. It was just a manual preparation error, and then determined some corrective safeguards. That same day at 11:17 a.m., a formal acknowledgement and an apology was sent to all of those recipients that were on the CC line, and preventative measures were outlined. Those corrective actions that were detailed in that email is all of our bulk external emails now required to use a BCC only template through Outlook. Our staff was reminded of county privacy standards and distribution protocols. And we're looking at the evaluation, or we're evaluating a centralized distribution tool to reduce manual error. That's a county-wide initiative, and we're really hoping that would launch this month. And then I can share that platform with you at the meeting next. It would be launched this month, and I could share it with you next month.
Comment on that.
Yeah.
I've personally used MailChimp for things like this.
Yeah.
And it's really a cheap way to avoid people having to, anytime you have two ways to do something, people will do it the wrong way.
Yeah.
So,
The status now, if you go to the next slide, as I said, it was not a system breach. There was no external compromise. The issue was resolved within about 2 hours of notification, and then those updated safeguards are in place.
Sydney, about how many people were affected?
Just around 90.
problem is that once you get an email on your computer that has everybody's address on it, if your computer gets a virus that goes in and finds all the emails that came on your computer, then everybody's in trouble. So tough world out there these days.
Any other comments about that before I move on? I know we're at time, so I'll kind of speed through this. This is just a reminder for any special events here at the airport. For any tenants or those wanting to hold an event, please email me, boyd@flyrmma.com for a special event permit application. That is required prior to any special event within airport property. And an airport special event is defined as a private, public, or nonprofit activity that would use airport property, which surpasses that which is common or usual for the airport. It would require any special arrangements, considerations, or planning of county employees. That form that I send to you requires an event site plan, a security and crowd control plan, permits if applicable from the fire department, a cleanup plan, aircraft parking plan, vehicle parking plan, written verification from airport tenant confirming allowed use on their leasehold, and litter control measures.
On the previous slide. You say any event that does this and this and requires special arrangements, considerations, and or planning by county employees. So does that mean that if county employees are not required for anything that person or organization is doing, they do not need a permit?
That's a great question. So can I, Dr. Adams, can I use an example?
Of course.
Okay, so Dr. Adams had a tour. She didn't need anything from me or any airport staff. I didn't have her fill out a event form, but she emailed me to say, just so you know, I'm bringing students. I have a dozen of them coming.
We had 20
of them coming. They'll be here from this time to this time. It was just letting me know. So if I were to get a call or one of our ops guys is like, hey, what's going on over on this part of the airfield? We're just all aware. It's just to make sure there's no safety implications. I didn't have to do anything. She didn't need me or my staff or anyone, time, but it was just making me aware. So she didn't fill out a form, and that's kind of what that means.
Just making sure that you do mean and, because if I were gonna have an event and it wasn't gonna involve county employees.
Yeah.
Then I would know that I don't need to do anything with it. Sure, it's nice to.
I think your point's fair. It's probably meant to be an or.
Yeah.
And we'll apply it as it's an or.
Well, let's ask the county attorney and the airport manager, should it be an and or an or?
I think that the standard of bear would be that if you have an event happening at your hangar that you think would change the operational impact of the airport, you should tell us. So like, if you're gonna have we'll use a couple dichotomies here. If you are gonna pull an aircraft out of your hangar and have like a bunch of friends over and have like a dance party or something, we probably would like to know, just from an operational impact part. If the thing is all in your hangar and it doesn't include anything off your leasehold, we'd be less inclined to care. However, there may be county restrictions that make it relevant that we might care. So if there is something non-standard, at least try to run it by us to ask, does this require a permit or not? And we'll answer that question.
The very fact that you have to describe that in such detail makes me think that this needs further work before you make it accepted policy.
Okay, fair.
The form ensures that we're thinking about safety and that your event runs smoothly. It needs to be filled out and approved at least 30 days before the event. And airport staff is always more than willing to meet to discuss your ideas for events or help think through logistics and how we can partner to make it successful. And then another reminder, I kind of threw it in last month, but on March 25th in this room, we are having a blood drive. We're maybe halfway full with spots at this point, but there are still plenty of slots to sign up for to donate blood. That's what I got.
All right, thank you very much. Looks like our next meeting is scheduled April 8th. That's correct. Does that work for everybody? Let me know if that did not work.
This is Jim Wood. I'm going to be out of the country on April 8th, so I'm not going to be able to call in or anything. And I'd also like a little clarification on when Eric is holding his dance party.
Boom. It just happened. You missed it.
Good with the 8th.
Yeah.
I'd also be good with the 20th on the following month.
All right, I think the 8th works, so grab to me. May 20th, that would work for me, and it sounds like
What day of the week is the 20th?
it's a Wednesday also.
Still a Wednesday.
Yeah, the next week on the Wednesday.
Should work for me too.
Yeah, for me too.
Yeah, 20th works for me too.
So May 20th instead of the second Wednesday, it'd be the third Wednesday.
Because then we could get the Part 150 noise study information direct.
You will get Part 150 noise study, whether it's the original date or the adjusted date. If we do May 20th, we're able to accommodate the consultant to come and make that presentation to you rather than just Ben and I talking about noise exposure maps. It would be better for everybody to have the experts do it.
All right, looks like April 8th and May 20th. All right, anything else? I'll entertain motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Did we get the second? Thanks very much, everybody. 6:08, looks like close the meeting.